I'm Eli, 31 years old, and last fall I got engaged to Maddie, the absolute love of my life. She's brilliant, kind, and possesses a wonderfully subtle sense of humor that always catches you off guard. What truly sets her apart is that she's never made me feel like I had to earn her affection. That last point is crucial, because in my family, everything, love, attention, even simple acknowledgement felt like it had to be one. Wanted even when you thought you'd done enough. Someone else would do one small thing, and suddenly you'd vanish into the background. That someone was usually my younger sister, Vanessa. Growing up, Vanessa was the golden child, the prodigy. She was the one with the flawless piano recitals, strata report cards, the most likely to become a CEO yearbook superlative. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't rebel. I earned decent grades, played soccer, and helped around the house. Everything I did seemed to be mere background noise to the blinding spotlight constantly fixed on her. If I came home with a 92 on a science test, my mom would ask, "Did Vanessa help you study?" If I landed the lead in the school play, my dad would suggest, "You should ask your sister to help you project more clearly. She has excellent stage presence." I spent years contorting myself, trying to become someone worthy of notice. Earned a scholarship to a good university, secured a stable job in finance, and bought my own place. I thought, just maybe, they would finally see me as more than a supporting act in the Vanessa show. But every visit home remained filled with framed photos of her shaking hands with impressive figures, newspaper clippings of her interviews, and stories that invariably began with, "Did you hear what your sister accomplished this time?" Still, I persisted. I kept trying. Deep down, I suppose I believed that if I just kept earning it, kept being dependable, successful, and good, they would eventually meet me halfway. Then came Maddie. She wasn't just my partner. She was the first person who saw me as the protagonist of my own story. She asked questions my parents never did. What do you truly desire? How do you genuinely feel about that? What makes you proud of yourself? Being with her felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 3 decades. So, when I proposed, under the willow tree where we had our first date, it wasn't just about beginning a future. It was about finally having a space and a person where I didn't have to prove a thing. We set a date for the engagement party, a low-key, intimate gathering, filled with people who knew us as a couple. College friends, coworkers, Maddie's cousins, even my childhood best friend Luke, who flew in from Denver. Maddie and I spent weeks meticulously choosing the venue, handwriting notes for every guest, and curating the perfect playlist. I informed my parents and Vanessa months in advance. My mom offered a non-committal. "We'll see what we can do." My dad said nothing. Vanessa simply sent a thumbs-up emoji. Still, I held on to hope. I even reserved a table for them near the front. It remained empty the entire night. Not a text, not a call, not even a last-minute excuse. I tried not to let it spoil the evening. But when you're giving a toast in front of 50 people and you scan the room to find your own parents absent, it hits differently. I plastered on a smile, clinked glasses, and danced with Maddie, but I felt like a 12-year-old again, wondering what I had done wrong this time. The next morning, I called my mom. She answered on the second ring, as if she'd been waiting. She said, "We were busy celebrating your sister's promotion. You know, she made VP at the firm, right?" It was kind of last minute. Everyone was there. It was a big deal. I just stood there, staring at my phone as if it had physically struck me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say anything cruel. Simply said, "Then don't be surprised when you miss the wedding too." And I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't try to explain myself. I didn't wait for them to apologize. I just stepped back. A week passed. No follow-up, no apology. Vanessa posted a carousel on Instagram from her promotion bash. Champagne, catered dinner, group photo with a caption that read, "Best night ever. Love my people." I wasn't tagged. Neither was Maddie. My mom was in 3 of the photos. Then last Saturday morning, I heard a knock at my apartment door. Opened it to find my dad standing there. He looked older than I remembered, not just from age, but something in his eyes looked weary, like a man who had finally stumbled upon a truth he'd been trying to avoid. He held something in his hand, a letter, folded and slightly crumpled. My stomach dropped the second I saw it because I recognized it. It was the letter I wrote 5 years ago, but never intended for anyone to read. I'd written it during a difficult period after a particularly brutal holiday visit where they spent the entire Christmas dinner discussing Vanessa's potential and asking if I was still doing that finance thing. I'd never given it to anyone. I just tucked it away in an old folder on my computer. But there it was, printed with parts highlighted. He must have found it somehow, maybe on a shared drive I'd forgotten I gave him access to. Or perhaps Vanessa snooped as she used to do when we were kids. My dad held up the letter as if it weighed more than it should. His voice cracked. "This why you cut us off?" I didn't answer, stepped aside and said, "Read it out loud." Looked at me for a long moment, then stepped inside. He unfolded the paper slowly, like someone defusing a bomb. Then he began to read. His voice wavered at first, as if he wasn't sure whether to be indignant or ashamed, but the words left him anyway. "Dear Mom and Dad," he began. "This isn't a letter I plan to send because I already know what you'll say. You'll tell me I'm being dramatic, that I'm too sensitive, or that I'm making everything about me again. But I need to write this, if only to hear myself say it just once, without being interrupted or told I'm overreacting." He paused. I said, "Nothing. I know Vanessa is your favorite. You've never said it aloud, but you didn't have to. It's in how you light up when she walks in. How you brag about her to everyone, while I stand 3 feet away holding news you never bother to ask about. It's in the way you remember her milestones, but forget mine. It's in the way you show up for her always, and for me, rarely and reluctantly." I watched him swallow, his fingers gripping the edge of the paper as if it might try to fly away. Da-da-da-da-da. He kept going. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from being in a room. It's full of people you're related to, and still feeling like a stranger. That's how it felt at every birthday party, every holiday dinner, every family event where I sat quietly while the spotlight stayed on her and stayed off me. You didn't raise a wall between us. You just never invited me inside. My dad shifted, glanced at me as if he wanted to say something, but the moment passed. He returned to the letter. "You'll probably say, I should be happy for Vanessa, that she worked hard, that she deserves her success. I am happy for her. But being happy for someone else doesn't mean pretending I'm not invisible, doesn't mean pretending I didn't grow up always trying to earn something that was freely given to her. Your pride, your attention, your love." His voice cracked on that last word. I could tell he wasn't prepared for how raw the letter was, how quietly damning. He looked up at me again, this time with something different in his expression. Not pity, not defensiveness, something more like understanding. Or perhaps the realization that understanding came years too late. But I didn't offer comfort. I didn't say it's okay because it wasn't. He looked back down. "I don't need a parade. I don't need constant applause. I just need you to see me, to know me. But I've spent 30 years waiting for that moment, and I've come to realize it's never coming. So I'm letting go, not out of bitterness, but out of mercy for myself. If you ever wonder why I'm distant one day, why I stop coming home, stop calling, stop pretending it doesn't hurt, let this be your answer. Because I can't keep knocking on a door you only open when Vanessa isn't around." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My dad didn't speak for what felt like a full minute, just stood there, eyes wet, lips parted, like a man trying to reconstruct a sentence from the wreckage of his own delusions. "I didn't know," he finally whispered. "You didn't want to?" I said, my voice low, but even. "That's not the same thing." He nodded once, then again, slower. "Your mom hasn't seen this." I raised my eyebrows. Would it matter? That caught him off guard. I didn't mean it to be cruel, but I wasn't in the mood to soften the truth. Not anymore. Not after the missed party. Not after every single time I came second. Or not at all. He exhaled long and heavy. "She loves you, Eli. We both do." "You love the version of me that doesn't ask for anything," I replied quietly. "You love the son who applauds Vanessa, who never complicates things, who doesn't speak up when he's being ignored." He looked older again, as if the truth aged him in real time. I wondered if this was what guilt looked like when it finally bloomed. Not loud or dramatic, just weary and filled with silence. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," he said. "Should have seen it." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You were busy celebrating," he winced. "I didn't let the silence linger too long this time. I didn't bring you here to hurt you. Dad, I needed you to know, because I'm done pretending. Maddie and I are building something new, something healthy. I won't bring that into a space where I still have to fight to be seen." He looked down at the letter again, then slowly folded it with trembling fingers. I could tell he wanted to say more, maybe explain, maybe apologize, maybe plead. But something in his posture told me he knew it wasn't time for that. That the damage wasn't a sudden rupture, but a slow erosion. That there wouldn't be a quick fix with just one sad conversation and a paper full of regret. Then, just as he turned to leave, he asked, almost like a child, "Am I invited?" I paused, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of that question. I wanted him to know that it wasn't automatic anymore, that invitations like love, like respect, weren't just assumed, they were earned. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I just looked him in the eye and said, "We'll see." And then I closed the door, not with anger, but with finality. That was 4 days ago. He hasn't called. Neither has my mom. But last night, Vanessa posted another photo, this time from a family dinner. My parents, her, a few cousins. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people who matter most." And just like that, I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I stared at that photo longer than I care to admit. Not because it surprised me, I knew by now where I stood, but because it confirmed something I'd been grappling with for months. They weren't going to change. Not for a wedding, not for a letter, not for me. And yet knowing that still hurt in a way I couldn't quite explain. I showed it to Maddie as we sat on the couch, coffee cups in hand, the morning sun spilling through the window, as if nothing in the world could be wrong. She looked at it, then at me. "You okay?" I nodded, the kind of nod that really means no, but you're tired of explaining why. "Yeah, I just thought maybe the letter would do something, wake them up." "It probably did," she said gently. "Just not in the way you hoped." I set the phone down and rubbed my eyes. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strangest part. Well, there wasn't any fire left. Just a sort of cold, quiet clarity. I wasn't a kid chasing their approval. I was a man deciding who belonged in the life he was building. That night, I did something I'd been postponing for weeks. I opened the spreadsheet I'd been using for wedding planning, guest lists, seating charts, meal preferences, addresses. I scrolled to the family section. There they were. My mom, Dad, Vanessa. I stared at their names for a long time. Then, without drama or ceremony, I pressed delete. Maddie didn't say anything. She was sitting across from me, reviewing caterer quotes. When I looked up, she had just met my gaze and nodded. That small moment, her silent understanding, made me feel more seen than any toast or family gathering ever had. But of course, it didn't end there. 3 days later, my cousin Jenna called. She was one of the few relatives I still spoke to regularly, someone who never took sides, never made me feel like I was competing for oxygen in a house that always had enough for one child, but not two. "Hey," she said cautiously. "Ken, I ask you something weird?" "Sure." "Did you uninvite your parents from the wedding?" I paused. "I just didn't send an invite." "That's not the same." She sighed. "Okay, well, they're saying you're cutting them out of your life completely. Your mom called my mom in tears, and Vanessa's going around saying you're doing this for attention." I let out a dry laugh. Of course, that old line. "I'm doing it for peace," I said, which is the opposite of attention. "I get it," Jenna said. "Quickly, I do. I'm just giving you a heads up. There's some noise in the group chats. People asking if they should still come if there's some drama brewing." "They're adults," I said. "They can make their own decisions." Jenna hesitated. "You know, this is going to blow up bigger than it needs to, right?" I nodded. "It already has." We hung up a few minutes later. I wasn't angry at her. I appreciated her warning, but the call left me with a weird sense of dread I couldn't shake. Not guilt, not regret, just that gnawing feeling you get right before a storm hits. When the sky is too quiet and the air smells like something's about to break, it came the next morning. A letter, not an email, not a voicemail, a real physical. A letter written in my mom's looping cursive on heavy cream stationery with the family crest at the top, the kind she used for Christmas cards and sympathy notes. Maddie found it first in the mailbox. She didn't open it, just handed it to me with a look that said, "Be careful." I sat at the kitchen table and opened it slowly. The paper crackled in that expensive way, meant to impress. I read the first few lines and then stopped, because it wasn't an apology. It was a defense. A long-winded explanation about how much they'd sacrificed for me growing up. How hard it was to balance two children with such different personalities. How they always tried their best, and how it was unfair of me to punish them for doing what they thought was right. Vanessa, my mom insisted, was just more high maintenance and needed more visible support. But that didn't mean I wasn't loved, too. Or phrases like, "We're sorry if you felt neglected, and you've always been more independent." Oh, the kicker. Maybe we could have done things differently. But it's hurtful that you're punishing us now, when we were just doing our best. I folded it up halfway through. Not because it was too much, but because it was exactly what I expected. Not once did they say they were sorry for missing the engagement party. Not once did they acknowledge the letter my dad had read word for word in my living room. Not once did they say, "We hurt you and we are sorry." I set the letter aside and didn't say anything about it for the rest of the day. Maddie didn't press. She just reached across the table and held my hand. That night, I sat in the dark, laptop open, cursor blinking over the blank reply. I wasn't sure I should. Send. But then I remembered something from the original letter, the one my dad read aloud, something I'd forgotten I even wrote. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for presence. And that's when I knew what I needed to do. Revenge. Not to make a point, but to make peace with the fact that sometimes the people who raise you are not the people who see you. And that walking away doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. So the next morning, I wrote one final message and I sent it. The message I sent that morning wasn't long. Didn't rehash the past or try to justify anything. I'd done enough of that in my life, trying to hold a mirror up. Two people who refused to look. This time I wrote simply, clearly, and for myself, not for their understanding. Mom, Dad, I read your letter. I believe that you think you did your best. I also believe that your version of best left me feeling unseen for most of my life. I'm not writing to argue about what happened or to debate which child needed more or to trade guilt for guilt. I'm writing to say this. I'm done waiting for you to love me the way I asked quietly, clearly, and without conditions. I'm done measuring my worth against Vanessa's, trying to earn space in a family where I was always a shadow. I have a new family now, one I chose and one that chose me. And as much as it hurts to say you won't be at the wedding, I wish you. Well, I really do. But from this point forward, I need distance, not to punish you, but to finally protect myself. Eli. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. 2 days passed, then 5, then a week. The silence was strangely comforting. Like the absence of a constant noise I'd gotten so used to that I'd forgotten how heavy it was. For the first time in a long time, I slept well. I breathed deeper, laughed more, not the polite kind. You give at family dinners, but the kind that comes from your chest, from people who make you feel safe. The wedding was a month away, and Maddie and I were deep in final preparations. The guest list had been finalized. The venue was a converted greenhouse outside the city, full of climbing ivy and glass walls that caught the sunset like stained glass. It was a place full of light fitting because this chapter of my life wasn't about escaping shadows. It was about stepping into something brighter. My best friend Luke was my best man. Jenna agreed to officiate. She'd known me since we were kids, and she was one of the only people from my extended family who never made me feel like a second act. Maddie's parents welcomed me like I was already their son. Her mom even joked, "We like you more than we like her sometimes." The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning my shirt slowly. My hands weren't shaking, just steady, calm. I'd expected to feel more nerves, but the truth was, this felt right. Like every step I'd taken, even the painful ones, had led me here. A few hours later, I stood under the canopy of flowers and glass, the sun beginning to dip, casting gold on everything. Maddie walked toward me in a dress that made time stop. I couldn't hear anything else, not the music, not the guests, not the rustle of the trees, just her. When she reached me, she took my hand and whispered, "You good?" I nodded. More than good. The ceremony was simple, honest, beautiful. When Jenna read a quote we'd chosen together, "The family you build is always stronger than the one you're born into, because it's built on choice, not obligation." I saw a few guests glance toward me knowingly. I didn't flinch. Maddie's hand tighter. We said our vows. We kissed. The greenhouse erupted in applause and laughter and love. And just like that, I had a new last name, or rather a new beginning. But of course, stories like this never end without one last ripple. 3 days after the wedding, as Maddie and I were packing for our honeymoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. "You didn't even tell us the date. You didn't give us a chance." It was from Vanessa. I stared at the screen for a while, before handing it to Maddie. She read it, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You want to respond?" I shook my head. No, she already said it all without meaning to, because that was the truth, wasn't it? They'd had 30 years of chances. I'd stood there, open-hearted and hopeful again and again. I'd invited them to school plays, graduation ceremonies, housewarming dinners. I'd called, visited, asked, waited. And when I finally stopped asking for crumbs and started building my own table, they noticed. It reminded me of something a friend once told me: when you stop playing a game, people built to keep you small. They'll call you selfish for walking off the board. Let them. We left for our honeymoon the next morning. 2 weeks in Greece, away from everything. I didn't check my email. I didn't scroll through family group chats. I didn't wonder what they were saying about me. I just lived. We walked along cliffs in Santorini, drank wine at sunset in Naxos, and swam in coves so blue they felt like another planet. One night, Maddie and I sat on a rooftop wrapped in blankets, watching the stars. "You ever think about going back?" she asked softly. "Back where?" She tilted her head. To them, I thought about it. Really thought about it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the tug, that ache, that need to be understood. It was gone. Or maybe it was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I turned to her and smiled. No, I think I finally arrived. When we came back home, life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. There were still bills, work, stress, and the occasional awkward conversation with distant relatives. But something had shifted inside me. I no longer measured myself against people who never truly knew me. I didn't check their social media. I didn't try to fix things. I just moved forward. The holidays came and went. We spent Christmas with Maddie's family, full of laughter, board games, and messy wrapping paper. I didn't get a single text from my parents. And honestly, that silence was the greatest gift of all. Not because it proved anything, but because it finally didn't matter. Jenna stayed in touch. She sent photos from our wedding to her mom, who apparently cried when she saw them. She said you looked happy, Jenna told me, and that she didn't realize how much she'd missed. I just nodded. I didn't need them to realize anything anymore. I'd spent my entire life hoping they would. Now, I was too busy living the kind of life I used to dream about, one full of real love, chosen people, and peace that didn't need to be explained. Every now and then, someone asks if I think I'll reconcile with my family. My answer is always the same. I've made peace with the past, but I don't owe it my future. Because in the end, this story wasn't about them. Not really. It was about me. And the moment I finally stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead.